So I'm Bill Freeman. I'm a teacher, recently retired, just at the end of this last school year, a third grade teacher. I'm also, or I was, the president of San Diego Education Association, which is the second largest teacher union in California. And I'm currently a director on the National Education Board.
And what is happening in education? You raised some concerns. You see some serious problems and issues facing public education in the United States.
Absolutely. It appears right now that the wealthy is going after public education. They're going after public education by privatizing them, pulling the money out of education. A lot of people think it's about the kids, but it's not about the kids. It's about the money in public education. And it's also about the views of certain individuals. Right now, according to Diane Ravage, about 80% of our public schools are now segregated. And that's alarming to me. Someone that grew up in a segregated school, it's disturbing. We don't want to go back to that. And a lot of people will not say it's bad because they haven't lived it. But the people that lived segregation will not want to go back to it. And that's the last thing that I want to see. So, and a lot of parents right now are voting against their own best interest because they're listening to people that are saying they are going to provide this for their kids and that for their kids, smaller class sizes and what have you. But they aren't providing good education to the kids. They just aren't doing it. I received one kid from a charter school that sat and faced a board. All day, every day, he faced a board. And his mom thought it was wrong, but she didn't know until she brought him to the school where I worked. These things are happening. And that's not to say that all charters are bad. There's some good charters around. In fact, teachers created charters because they wanted the autonomy to teach kids a different way. But that's been hijacked. It's been hijacked by the wealthy, and now they are privatizing them. They are segregating them. And I don't know if you've ever been to Louisiana, New Orleans, Louisiana, but if you ever have an opportunity to get there, go there, and you will see the haves and the have-nots. You will see segregation, I think, at its worst, and you will see where this country is headed if it continues to go the way that it's headed right now.
Now, when charters came in, as you said, the unions, labor supported charters, education unions, what happened between their supportive charters and the process that now you feel threatens the whole existence of public education and further segregation?
Individuals saw opportunities there. They saw opportunities, and I can't think of the name of the individual from in New York, but he put it probably honest than most. He said there are $5 billion a year in public education. They may as well get some of that money. And that's what this is all about. They pulled all the money out of housing. The housing market caused the collapse on our economy. And now they're looking to do the same with public education. And again, it is not about the kids. This is about the money that can be pulled out of public education. It's about privatizing education, and it's about experimenting with our kids.
And how do they pull money out of education?
Well, if they open up a charter school, they get money based upon the enrollment there. Now, the money that comes to them isn't locked in to say it must go here, it must go there, it must do this. They get so much money per child. They will pay the educators less. They will provide less to the kids, and they can get buildings practically free. And the rest of that money is profit for them. It's a profit for them, and they make very good money doing that.
And this was presented as a way of helping kids in poor neighborhoods, poor Latino and black neighborhoods, as a way of advancing them so they had an opportunity. What has been the reality about that promise?
The reality is that a lot of the kids in these high poverty neighborhoods are not even allowed to go to those schools. They will enroll there, and then as soon as the state test is up on them, the kids are kicked out and they are sent to public schools. And any public school teacher will tell you that just before the state test window opens, they get a lot of kids from charter schools because charter schools do not want them. They will hold them until they can lock in the average daily attendance funds that they get per child, and then they will kick them out. Now, note that they don't generally take kids with individual education plans, the IEPs, special ed. They don't generally take kids they take from our public schools the best and the brightest, and then they hold them up to say, look what we've done. That's okay. I don't really have a problem with that. My problem is that they don't teach them. They don't advance their education. They hold them up. They tell the parents all their kids will go to college. And now many of the kids are having problems in college because they taught them how to pass a test. They didn't further their education. And that's kind of what's happening right now with a lot of our kids in a lot of the charter schools.
Now, there's legislation, No Child Left Behind, and Race to the Top, which presented kind of an idea that you have to go in a lottery to get a good public education. What's behind those kind of ideas?
I do believe that No Child Left Behind it came about with good intentions, but it came about by individuals that knew very little about public education. And I would say about kids, for anyone to think that all kids learn at the same rate, that is ridiculous. If that's not the most ridiculous thought, anyone that has more than one kid in their family knows that kids are different. They are different in the personality, they are different in the way that they learn, they are different in so many ways. And for, I think it's this year, all kids are supposed to be proficient in reading. That will never happen. It will never happen because we have kids with a lot of problems. And I'll mention some of those, but I want to mention the race to the top. Race to the top it's somewhat of a ripoff of public dollars. It's taking money and saying, okay, we're going to award these dollars to the schools that can do the best here and the schools that can change the teacher's contract so that we can get rid of teachers much easier. Right now, we can get rid of teachers. All the administrators have to do is do what they are supposed to do to get rid of those teachers. It will take a couple of months, probably 4 months. We don't want to go back to where teachers are told what to wear. They are terminated because they are expecting, and so forth and so on. We've passed those times, but there's an effort to go back to those times. So Race to the Top was taking money. It really was a race. It was about who could do best, and not just learning, but who could make it easier to get rid of educators. And they would get money. And it's proven to be a failure. Both of those have proven to be a failure.
Now, the testing business, Pearson and Company and many testing, it seems like more and more time is being spent in the classroom on testing rather than education. That's number one. And number two, the idea that testing should be a major factor in the evaluation of teachers and the evaluation of kids when kids come from poorer areas, neighborhoods where the parents have to work 2-3 jobs. How can testing play such a big role in education when the kids in working class, poor conditions, immigrant kids, have a completely different economic circumstance?
It's a very good question. There's a lot of money in testing, and I think that that's the driving force in the testing. Our schools have produced some brilliant minds over time. And even now, if you go to Japan, I was at a conference with a professor from Japan, and he was saying, we are trying to be like you guys, but yet we are trying to be like them. We're trying to extend our days. And he, according to him, they stopped testing because they were putting so much pressure on educators and administrators that they were cheating in order to satisfy them. So, in the time that it takes to test our kids, we are we're failing our kids. We're testing them on things that we haven't even taught them. We have tests that we have to give at least 4 to 8 tests a year, and that doesn't include the state tests. And they are quarterly tests. But a lot of times when you're teaching, if a child doesn't understand what you're teaching, you have to reteach it and try another way. You may have to do that 2 or 3 times before that child gets it. Well, at the end of that quarter, you haven't covered everything that you need to cover because the child doesn't understand what they need to understand to build up on the next topic that you're going into. But yet we test those things anyway. So oftentimes we're setting kids up for failures. And not only that, with No Child Left Behind, we label the kids, which is probably the most tragic thing that this country has ever done to a child. So we label them advanced. If they test and they do really well on the test, they are considered an advanced student. Proficient, if they test and do okay on the test. Basic is when they don't do so well. Below basic is when they do bad. And far below basic is when they do really, really poor. Those kids know those labels. Their parents know the labels. And it troubles me that we often compare education in this country with education in Finland, for instance. And Finland is often one of the countries that we're compared to. And they will show the test scores or cite the test scores of the kids in Finland versus the kids here. And then they will tell us what we have to do. What they don't do is they don't cite the other important factors in Finland and compare it to the similar factors here in the United States. Poverty, for instance, is like 2% in Finland. Finland select their teachers. They will take the top 10%, pay their way through college, provide professional development for them. They have health care from cradle to grave. Those are important factors. Our country, I feel that our elected officials have let us down, and they have shifted the responsibility. It is not a coincidence that our high failing schools are in our highest poverty area. It's no coincidence. We have educators that I've talked with have often and regularly purchased shoes for kids because they didn't have soles in their shoes, sweaters and jackets because the kids was coming to school cold and were not appropriately dressed. Every year I've had at least 2 homeless kids, and these are third grade students. They're 8 and 9 years old. I've had at least 2 homeless kids. And think about a kid hopping from place to place every night. And it's not because the parents want to be homeless. It's because they don't have any choice. They don't have the jobs. They don't have the income and so forth and so on. But then we're expected for the kids to come to school, for them to do great on the test and learn without any impediments. And you can't do that. It's just not going to happen. And regardless to where they are, we put these tests in front of them, and they have to go through this hours and hours of testing when I venture to say they should be learning. They should be learning. We give the kids tests. We test their ability. That's why we reteach. When they don't get it, we'll reteach it. But if they don't pass the test, often we don't know it until late. And when we know that they didn't pass it, we often don't know exactly what it was that they didn't pass.
Well, in the past, before the testing business got so powerful, wasn't it the case that teachers actually did the tests
Absolutely.
in many cases? So
Absolutely.
teachers can actually do the tests they know what they're teaching.
Well, we do know what we're teaching, and there are professionals that have developed books, assessments for us to use while we're teaching, and we develop them as we are going along, and we use those to grasp whether or not a student understand what it is that we're teaching. And it's very, very important for us as educators to know what they've learned and what they have not learned. But that's not enough. Now they've come out with these standardized tests, and I personally feel it's a way to make money. If you think about it, I guarantee it's billions of dollars every year. And as the kids do better on the tests become harder. And if you read some of the test questions, it's a game that they play. You mix words up, and for third graders, you shouldn't do that. They know the concept or they don't know the concept, but you shouldn't mix words and play with their mental capacities, because the Common Core test that my kids took this year, parents must take that test. Every parent should take that test, and they have sample tests online for parents to take. They need to know what their kids are taking before they take it. I don't think that it's appropriate. I do not think that it's age appropriate. I think that most of the kids will fail that test. And I think that the test is designed to be failed, because if you think about it, if all the kids pass that, we wouldn't be taking them. So the money that schools and districts are paying to get those tests, they would be low. I think that this is all about money. It's all about the dollar.
Now, the people who are driving for more profits to commodify education, make it a more profitable business, and take money from the public schools into private interests, what has been their role in the politics, boards of education, government agencies? Is there a connection between their role in the classrooms and what they're presenting, and also who is controlling the whole education process?
Well, yes and no. In California, the California Teachers Association is attempting to work with the State Board of Education to try and have a say in what's being put on these tests. That's in California. Most states do not have that. Most states, these things are developed there, and I don't know who develops them, but they are developed and then pushed down on the districts, and the districts then render the test to the kids. There's a lot of money behind all of this. Our elected officials, donations are made to our elected officials by many of these big companies and the wealthy individuals that's coming after public education, for them to support this effort. And it's all across the board. It's one of these things that we can't compete with because we don't have the money. They have made huge donations to the media, to elected officials. They know who to donate to.
Can you give some examples of how this is?
Well, look at Fox News. Look at the Koch brothers. They give millions of dollars across the board. They give them to this organization called ALEC, and ALEC will develop legislation so that they can eliminate unions in the states. In Michigan, they've developed legislation to make it easier to eliminate collective bargaining. And parents don't understand it, but collective bargaining contracts is a contract for them and their kids. It's a contract that might say class sizes will be no more than. Uh, Kids will be in class for so many hours a day. That's not just for the educators, that's for the parents, that's for their kids. There's no other contract that you will have that's that clear. The ed code has some, but it's so thick that you don't understand it, and it's written by the legalese, and it's difficult to understand. The contracts, the labor contracts, are very, very clear, clearly written, and it's enforced by the teachers. And that's a contract between the teachers, the district, but it's with the parents and the students. And that's how we have a voice in what we do in the classrooms. But we're losing that battle right now because we just don't have the money to compete with these wealthy individuals as they do with all of the media outlets. Every media outlet, everyone will say education in the United States is broken. It's broken. And then they will compare us to Finland and they compare us to other countries. But they don't look at the poverty. They never mention poverty anymore. They don't even think well, they won't say that has a factor in public education or in a child's learning. So there's a bit of unfairness right now in this education battle.
Are you shocked by the fact in the United States that there's a massive scapegoating of teachers, blaming teachers for the problems in education and bullying, workplace bullying against teachers? I mean, it seems like there's an epidemic of that going on in the United States.
I'm shocked and disappointed. I really am. And I'm not a career teacher. I retired from the military and decided I would teach after having mentored kids around the country. So I only taught for 19 years. I didn't teach for the 30 and 40 years. And I will tell you, teaching is a very difficult job. You spend about 14 hours a day, doing the jobs that you have to do in order to teach the kids. You've got to prepare lesson plans for them. You've got to grade work for them. You've got to look to see who learned what, who didn't learn what they were supposed to, develop specific lessons for them. And if that doesn't work, you've got to search. You've got to go and find another way to approach it. It is a very difficult, very time-consuming process. And it's so disappointing that anyone would attack them. And parents can go to classrooms. They can see what's going on in the classrooms so that they don't have to listen to the rhetoric that's out there on the media that schools are broken. Now, many of the parents had difficulties in school themselves, particularly parents in high poverty communities. They often have had difficulties in school because their parents couldn't stay at home. My parents, I grew up in high poverty. My parents couldn't stay at home and read with me, or my brothers, because they had to work. And that's a huge problem. You just cannot exclude poverty from this, from the formula when you're looking at public education. You can't do that. And it is very, very disappointing that teachers are used as a scapegoat for what our society has failed to do, particularly our elected officials.
Now, in poverty areas like Ferguson, for example, in Missouri, the schools have been privatized. There's an attack on education. The school that Michael Brown went to had been restructured. They bring in these Teach for America young teachers.
Yes.
And they want to privatize the whole public education system. Is there a connection between racism in this country and what's going on in the education system?
It is. There is a connection there. There's definitely a connection, and anyone that doesn't see it is blind. One of the politicians, Ron Paul, said, I don't know whether it was junior or senior, but I heard it probably about 6 months ago on KPBS. He said that all schools in this country should be 20% of all schools in this country should be privatized. From that 20%, all of our leaders should come. Now, he added, that's not to say that someone's not going to surface from that other 80% here and there. But you know the kids that will be in that 20%. It won't be kids that look like me, I assure you of that. It won't be kids from the high poverty areas. It would be a way set up for the wealthy to ensure that their kids succeed and maintain the political wealth and positions that they've enjoyed. And it's troubling. What's more troubling than anything else is for the community at large not to see what's happening.
Now, when segregation was outlawed in this country, Brown versus Board of Education, there was a push to have so-called community schools.
Right.
And the idea was that people who did not want to integrate the schools would have community schools funded by the federal government, by the public. Is that really what's happening with charters in the United States at this point?
Well, I'll tell you, with charters right now, we have private schools that's being funded by the taxpayers. That's what charters are. Because unlike public schools, when someone show up in my door, I had to teach them. I don't care whether they were in wheelchair. I don't care whether they're pink, black, blue, whatever color. I had to teach them. I don't care whether they were homeless. I had to teach them. That's not the case with charters. Charters will say they put them in a lottery. But if you look at who's chosen from the lottery, it's always the cream of the crop from our public schools. It's not the homeless kids. It's not the kids whose mothers and fathers are working 2 and 3 jobs a day and do not have the time to volunteer at the schools. So it's not a community school. It's not a public school, which it's paid as a public school. It's indeed a private school. They're very selective about who they allow to come to these schools. And if the wrong child gets in, they are quickly expelled, and they do not have to meet the ed code requirements because they are charter. Charter schools do not have the oversight that public schools have. And that's why they are able to do these things. And it's sad. It's a waste of taxpayer. It's hijacking taxpayers' dollars.
Now, the other aspect is there are companies and individuals like the Goulden schools that have come into the United States and propagated an ideology in a public school that they believe in. What is the danger of that, and is it happening in San Diego County?
It's happening in and around San Diego, and I'd venture to say it's happening in and around, or in the United States in general. I have seen the first segregated school since I grew up, right here in California. I understand there are religious schools here. There are political schools. You have to be of a certain political persuasion. The charter schools are so under-regulated that we can never get away with that in public schools, but charter schools can get away with that because the oversight isn't there, but the money is there. So oftentimes our elected officials will turn their heads to these things because of the donations that's provided to them. So yes, that's happening, and sadly enough, I think that when it's brought to light, we will have really corrupted or possibly ruined the education of a lot of kids.
So why don't you give some specific examples in San Diego County of how that's happening?
Well, I don't want to call names, but I will tell you some things that I've witnessed. For instance, there was one charter school, nice charter school. Kids were doing well and so forth and so on. Well, the board, or one individual on the board, caused, due to pressure, a number of individuals on the board to resign, and brought in his friends. And he decided that he wanted to take that school in a certain direction. The parents didn't agree with him. There were a lot of parents that stood up against him. This individual changed the uniform requirement for the students and notified all of the supportive parents. The non-supportive parents, he didn't notify. So when their kids attended school that next day, they had to stand outside, face the wall in the rain, mind you, for their lunch period until there was about 10 minutes remaining. Then they were allowed to go and get lunch. We ended up, when we found out about it, and this is in the San Diego Education Association, we found out about it because parents and educators were coming to us complaining. And then we filed child abuse.
That's clinical abuse?
Absolutely. We filed a complaint with Child Protective Services. So to make a long story short, that school was eventually closed down. But if you think about that school is a very, very, very small piece of what's happening in this country. Because of the lack of regulations, because of the money that's presented to our elected officials, heads are turned away from regulating these charter schools. And they can say, oh yes, our kids are doing this, all of our kids go to college. Very possible, because the kids that would not go to college are kicked out, and they are pulling other kids in with the grades to where they will go to college. I'm really anxious to see how kids do in college that have received these years of testing and been taught to pass tests and not taught the learning that we've normally enjoyed in this country.
Now, you're supporting, signed on to a proposition, an initiative that would change the charter law in California back and repeal what was passed in 1992. Why are you taking that position?
Because I think any school that receives public dollars should be regulated. We should not have rogue schools that's doing whatever they want to. I believe in autonomy. I believe in educators' autonomy so that they can teach kids the way that they learn. I believe in that. But I believe in oversight. I don't think that you should have kids standing in the rain facing a wall because they didn't wear a uniform. I don't think that you should expel a child from school because they have a special education learning plan. I don't think that you should reject them for that reason. I don't think that they should be kicked out of your school because they could not test well on a standardized test. These are the things that's happening in charter schools that we would never tolerate in public schools.
But there are some efforts to reform regulation and to try to make the charter schools follow more standardized regulation. You don't believe that will work?
I can't say that will or will not work. From what I've seen right now, I don't think that it will work. And the reason I say I don't think it will work is because of the money that's involved in it. Our elected officials that are given the monies that they are given for their campaigns, and money buys just about anything. And right now, it's buying our schools. It's buying the privatization of our schools. That's what's happening, and that's why I don't think that will work.
Now, the Gates Foundation, the Broad Foundation, the Walton Foundation for the Walmart family, what role do they have in public education in California?
Well, I can say that Bill Gates does provide some good things in public education. He does fund some good things, and I cannot believe that anyone would not think, for instance, class size doesn't matter, which is one of the statements that he has made. The Walton and what have you, what role do they have? They want to control public education. And I don't know whether they've just got so much money that they are tired of they just don't have anything else to do. But right now I will say that many of those individuals with the wealthy are going after public education because they want it to be run like a business. And you can't do that. You just can't do it. I've said a number of times, when you find when you're running a business and you find a broken part, you can throw it away. You can just take it and throw it away and produce a new one. You can't do that with a child. If they aren't learning, you can't just say, well, we'll just throw them away and move forward. You can't do that. You have to work with that kid, and it's going to take you probably more time than with some of the other kids. But you just cannot run education like a business, because kids are not, they aren't gadgets, they aren't widgets, they are people, and they all learn differently.
But it seems there is a growth of the prison industry.
There is.
And for young people, a lot of young people, particularly in minority communities, end up going to jail, end up being arrested, and that's their life for many of them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's worse now that the prison system in many states now is privatized. It's much, much worse. And you can also connect that with the poverty. You can connect it with the poverty. You can connect it with the monies or the lack of monies that's being spent on public education. There's a connection there. And personally, I wonder if this is not a well-planned, well-orchestrated way to put kids of color in confinement, or whatever it is that they are doing. I mean, there are so many things that's happening in this country now that's so alarming to me. It's really frightening to see some of the things that's happening in these high poverty communities. And if anyone, I don't care what your color is, if anyone think that that's not going to happen to their child, or it's not capable of happening to their child, they are mistaken.
And are you surprised that more money is spent in the prisons in California than in education in California?
I'm surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed. I'm not surprised, because money drives everything, and there's money to be made in the prison system, just as there's money to be made in public education. Money is being pulled out of public education. It's being put into the prison system, but someone, I guarantee you, if you've researched that, someone's making a lot of money by locking all of those kids up versus educating them. Someone's making, this is all, at the end of the day, this all comes down to money.
Now, there is an attack not just on public education and teachers, but public services. Privatization of the post office, privatization of all kinds of public services, outsourcing. There are unions that represent millions of workers, public workers, ASME, SEIU, NEA, AFT. Why hasn't there been an organized political national education campaign to defend public education, to defend public services? It seems like there is no political movement to really educate the public and working people, but all people, about the dangerous effects of these attacks on public services, public education.
Well, there is a movement, but we just cannot compete with the money that they have. We cannot compete with the millions of dollars that the Koch brothers have to do that. We just don't have that kind of money. We just do not have that kind of money. You know, there's an effort right now. You lower the taxes. You know, the Citizen United. Now, there's just no way that unions can compete with that. They put billions of dollars into elections to hire the people that they want to hire, so that they can have the education system that they want. And that's why they are breaking the education system. And it is a civil rights issue. And I do believe that we will see an uprising in this country before long, addressing that issue. And I don't think it's just going to be with the people of color. It's going to be with the high poverty, the people that have lost their homes, that have lost their jobs, that have lost their benefits. And the jobs that are coming back are not the jobs that were lost. There is a movement to control the voting system in this nation. We've seen it. It's all over. They've changed the voting districts. They've changed the voting rules to where you have to have an ID. In some states now, they've even changed citizenship requirements for Latinos, where when they give birth here, whether they're citizens or not, the child born here would be a citizen. I know in Texas now that there's a judge that's not honoring that. There are so many things that's happening to try and really try and push out Latinos, because whether we like it or not, they will become a majority in this country. And I don't think there's any stopping of that. But there's an effort underway to do that by eliminating or limiting the social programs, thinking that that's going to push them out of this country. It's not going to happen. That 47% that was referred to by one of our elected officials, that was addressing Latinos. We don't care who they vote for. They don't care. You're not going to change that. But there is an effort today by certain elected officials in certain parts of this country to try and silence the voice of the potential, I think, the inevitable majority in this country by changing those voting laws, by an attempt to eliminate the services that are provided. That's one of the reasons that there was such a fight against the Obamacare. Who would not want people to have health insurance? Who would not want that? I can't imagine that. And I feel that if we had a decent tax system in this, I don't care if it was a blanket, I don't care if it was just everyone pays 5% or whatever, no exceptions. You pay 5% of what you earn, no exception. If everyone did that, we wouldn't have to build up walls around this country. We have to remember, none of us, most of us, I should say, unless we are Native Americans, most of us were immigrants, are immigrants to this country. But now to say, no, we don't want these individuals, we're going to build up a wall, there's something wrong with that.
And how should people get involved in trying to change this situation?
I don't think that we're going to change this until we come together. The best way to get involved is to just start a movement. Start a movement. I know there's one here in California in Escondido. I know there's one in San Diego, with people trying to come together to push back against the wealthy and these special interest groups that's attempting to not only take over public education, but I think they're attempting to run this nation. And the way that they are going to do it is through public education. So they should reach out to those groups that are pushing back. And there are a lot of them. There are a lot of them. And if you don't know who they are, I would gladly tell you. I will gladly direct you to a group that will work with you. But we need to come together, not just to save public education, but I think to save a great nation. Because this nation will not be what it has been if it continues to go in the direction that it's going in right now. We will see segregation come back. We will have the haves and the have-nots for sure. Right now we see an elimination of the middle class. It's eroding the middle class right now. And that's not just by chance. This economy, the crash of the economy, that didn't have to happen. It happened because of greed. It happened because of greed. And yes, we got a couple of $100s, but we got nothing in comparison to what Wall Street got and these big money banks got.
Now, the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, said that it was a great opportunity, the hurricane in New Orleans, to basically remake the education system in New Orleans. And recently, the Board of Education in Chicago announced that they would like to have a similar ecological disaster so they could do in Chicago what was done in New Orleans. What is this ideology about?
Well, first off, shame on them. Shame on them for ever making a statement like that, particularly anyone in any leadership position. That is about wealthy wanting to pull money out of public education and make it a business. That's what they want to do. They wanted to make it a business and sell it to the highest bidder, more often than not, their friends. And it's not about kids. It's about money. And it's about creating haves and have-nots. And that's where we are going right now. And that's it in a nutshell. It's not about increasing the learning opportunity for all kids. It's about creating a system for the haves and for the have-not. which is very, very clear if you go to New Orleans and look at what's happening there. It's very clear. They have the haves there. They're segregated in many communities, and the have-nots.
So in reality, the destruction of the public education
Absolutely.
school system
Absolutely.
how has it transformed New Orleans? Is it
It hasn't transformed New Orleans. If you look at New Orleans, they're not doing any better. Charter schools are not doing any better than public schools. But what it has done for New Orleans is that it has brought back the segregation opportunities that existed years ago there, which is still prevalent in the minds of some, actually many, in the South. And it's brought that back now. And that's why they are so welcoming to that type of system. And also with Arnie Duncan, it's created that competition where certain schools are doing really, really well because the wealthy kids have always had an advantage over the poor, and they do today.
and the testing, of course, it's going to be kids who have better backgrounds
Absolutely.
economically,
Absolutely.
have better, their parents can have special supplies, special training. Their kids are obviously
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, our kids, we both have graduate degrees, and our kids are going to always do better than kids that are raised in a high poverty community. They're going to always do better. Our kids are going to go to college. Their kids aren't going to go to college because they're struggling. You know, I had kids that were home alone until 9 o'clock at night because their parents were working 2 jobs. These are 8, 9-year-old kids home alone, and it was that or turn off the electricity and not put food on the table. It's not much of a choice, but it's an easy decision to be made by parents that's trying to do what's right by their kids. But the problem, I feel that we need to have individuals in our leadership positions, elected officials, that vote for the country, not for some political party. I don't care what your political party is, not for your political party and not for a special interest group. They need to be able to vote for what's good for the country and the people of this country. And right now we don't have that.
now in California, you have over 100 billionaires.
Right.
There's tremendous wealth in California, yet young people are having difficulty getting a decent public education, and the cost of education now, community college, state college, and university, is prohibitive for
True.
young people in
True.
California.
True. True.
Should education be free in California?
I think it should be free across this country. It should. We are one of the wealthiest nations in the world. And what has happened is we have allowed a handful of people to take the money and put it overseas and hoard it. It's not going back into the economy. That's why the feds are looking at, well, should we raise or should we lower the tax base? The wealthy want the tax to be raised now. They want them to raise it because they're saying, well, unemployment is up. The unemployment that has come back is not the employment that was lost. Education is a civil rights issue, and the individuals that's making the decisions, they know that. That will go back to a previous conversation that we had where they want to control the voting bloc in this country. And if you don't educate, you're going to incarcerate or you're going to run individuals out of this country. I think that that's the big effort right now underway. And it's being pushed by special interest groups and some high-level billionaires and, sadly enough, some of our elected officials.
Okay.